I stepped into the boardroom just before 9, like I had for the last 6 years. Same quiet stride, same confidence. But that morning, the room felt different. Heavier, too quiet. Across the glass table sat Celeste Mercer, CEO of Halberd Systems. Tall, composed, cold as steel. And also my mother-in-law. I was Thane Mercer, Chief Commercial Officer, and husband to her daughter, Blythe. Or so I believed. 2 board members sat beside me, too tense for a routine quarterly review. Even Janet from HR, who usually wore a rehearsed smile, looked like she was holding her breath. The room felt like a verdict waiting to be delivered. Celeste leaned forward, fingers interlaced, and said without emotion, "We're terminating your contract, Thane." The words struck like a bucket of ice water. "For performance?" I asked, baffled. "For performance," she repeated, clipped and certain. I had a spotless record. 3 of the company's top 5 deals that year were mine, including a $3.4 million contract I'd just closed. I'd worked late, sacrificed weekends, skipped vacations. I'd built this company's growth with my time, my life. But I saw it then. This wasn't about work. "This your decision?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She just stared at me, then slid a white envelope across the table. "Your severance is in there. It's generous." That was it. I stood up, took the envelope, and walked out of that glass box like I'd just stepped off a cliff. No one tried to stop me. No one even looked up. In the elevator, the reflection staring back wasn't one I recognized. Hollow. Disoriented. When had I stopped being the author of my own life? I drove straight home to our apartment in Astoria Heights, San Francisco. Blythe sat on the living room couch, the white one she babed like it was royalty, wearing a silk robe, sipping her coffee like it was just another Tuesday. No questions. No concern. She simply handed me another envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "Instructions for your next chapter," she said, smiling a smile I didn't know. Inside, a pamphlet. A homeless shelter. Warm meals. Clean clothes. Second chances. No letter. No explanation. "What is this?" I whispered. She shrugged. "I don't need someone who doesn't work. You were useful. For a time. Useful. Not partner. Not husband. Just useful." She turned and walked into the kitchen, not even looking back. "My mother wanted this to happen," she said over her shoulder. "We just waited until it wouldn't be messy." The truth crashed down. The laughter, the vacations, the forced intimacy, all a performance. And I'd been the oblivious actor. I left with one suitcase. The San Francisco sky mocked me, clear, uncaring. That night, I checked into a rundown motel near Emery Point, Oakland. The mattress felt like paper. The silence was suffocating. Not a single call. Not one text. Until the next morning. Missed call, Celeste. Then Blythe. Then another. By day's end, 22 missed calls. I ignored them all. Empty inside, but not finished. For the next few nights, I sat in that motel, replaying every chapter of our relationship, looking for clues, for signs. But I wasn't ready for what came on the 8th morning. My phone buzzed. Missed calls, 42. Messages, 17. Then, an incoming video call from Blythe. I let it ring. A moment later, a text appeared. "We need to talk. We didn't know who you really are." I stared at the screen. Then I smiled. They kept calling. Celeste, Blythe, even Silas Granger, the CFO who'd never said 2 words to me unless it was about numbers. But I didn't answer, because none of them ever knew who I really was. They only knew me as Thane, the charming, self-made guy with a gift for persuasion. The man who started from the bottom. And that was true. Mostly. But here's what I'd never told them. My full name was Thane Mercer, grandson of August Mercer, founder of the Mercer Group, a tech empire with holdings in over 20 major firms, including several tied to Halberd Systems. I had hidden my lineage because I wanted to earn everything on merit, without legacy, without shortcuts. And I did, until they tried to bury me. Now they wanted help, but I was already preparing something far bigger. The next morning, I called Everett Locke, the man who had managed my family's trust since I turned 18. Discreet, loyal, efficient. "Activate Clause 7 on the Nexus portfolio," I told him. He paused. "You're certain, Mr. Mercer?" More than ever. By the time the sun set 2 days later, Mercer Holdings had acquired 52% of Halberd Systems' outstanding debt through proxy firms. I didn't buy the company. I bought what kept it breathing. That weekend, the calls from Blythe turned frantic. I made a mistake. I didn't know what I was doing. My mother pressured me. Empty words. Coming from the same woman who handed me a shelter brochure without blinking. She didn't want forgiveness. She wanted access. I left her on read. The plan was simple. Show up Monday morning at 9. Same time. Same place. The room where they tried to erase me. But this time, I wouldn't be the one sitting across the table. I'd be the one holding the table up. I spent the weekend in total silence. No drinking. No distractions. Just documents, contracts, and legal authorizations. Every signature returned a piece of the power they thought they'd stripped away. But this time, I wasn't coming back as the same thing. I arrived at Halbert's headquarters at 8:45 a.m. sharp. Midnight blue suit, crisp tie, leather portfolio under my arm. Nobody at reception stopped me. Nobody suspected a thing. I took the elevator to the top floor, walked into the boardroom, and sat where I used to only now. I wasn't the guest. A few execs were already seated. They glanced at me, confused. No one said a word. Then Celeste walked in. Her eyes locked on mine, and for the first time, I saw something unfamiliar. Fear. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. "Have a seat," I said calmly. She hesitated, but my tone left no room for debate. I pulled out the documents, slid them across the table. "This is a notice of debt acquisition," I said. "As of this morning, I'm Halbert Systems' majority creditor." She read. Her hands trembled. "You planned this." "No," I said. "You did. This is betrayal," she whispered. "What you did was betrayal. What I'm doing is balance." Silence followed. A long, heavy silence. "Your position no longer exists, Celeste," I continued. "Effective immediately. HR will send your separation terms." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. "And as for Blythe," I added, "my attorney will deliver the divorce papers by noon. No discussion. No appeals." I stood, took my portfolio, and walked out. No one followed. That afternoon, I returned to the apartment in Astoria Heights, not to talk, just to take what was mine. Blythe was there. Red eyes. No makeup. That confident mask gone. What did you do?" she stammered. "What I had to." "We can fix this," she said, stepping closer. "There is no we," I replied. I placed a folder on the table. Divorce. No second chances. No reconciliation. She didn't argue. She collapsed onto the couch as I closed the door behind me. That night, I stood on the balcony of a hotel downtown, watching the lights shimmer across the bay. For the first time in weeks, I breathed without pain. I was no longer the man who stayed up late just to impress his mother-in-law. I was the man who rose after they tried to end him. And that was just the beginning. The days that followed were strangely quiet. Celeste's name stopped appearing in company emails. Internal chatter began shifting. Employees no longer walked with tension in their shoulders. Headlines rolled in. Power shift at Halbert Systems. Surprise shakeup in tech giants' leadership. But I didn't celebrate. I didn't pop champagne. I didn't smile. I went back to work. I reassigned department heads, launched an internal audit, canceled inflated contracts, removed 3 directors who had long played by Celeste rules, not out of spite, but to restore trust where it had been bled dry. In my new office, overlooking the water, I hung just one picture, a night aerial of San Francisco. Bright, chaotic, honest. A mirror of what I just survived. Blythe messaged me 3 times. One said she hated me. One said she still loved me. One said she was lost. I didn't reply. Then, at 11:47 p.m., she sent something different. He left me. Used me. I'm alone. I didn't need to ask who he was. The man she replaced me with had vanished. Probably once he realized Blythe no longer had access to anything. But I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt still. That weekend, I drove back to the same motel where I'd stayed when everything collapsed. I sat on the same thin bed, under the same flickering light, and pulled out the brochure Blythe once gave me. Homeless shelter. Warm meals. Second chances. Second chances. I smiled, because what she meant as an insult became my foundation. The following Monday, I called my legal team and founded something I knew the world actually needed. Zero Mark Foundation. Its mission? To support displaced men with job training, temporary housing, and legal assistance. Everything I would have needed if I hadn't been born with a name that opened doors. The irony didn't escape me. That little brochure, meant to humiliate me, had become a blueprint for something real, something meaningful, something no one could fake. A few days later, I received a message on LinkedIn. It was from Mira Langston, one of Blythe's former co-workers from the marketing department. "Thank you for what you're doing," she wrote. "You changed the energy in this company. For years, we worked under fear and manipulation. Now it feels like we can breathe again." Her words stopped me cold. What if this was the point all along? Not revenge. Not payback. Purpose. That night, I sat on the rooftop of my new apartment, smaller, simpler, and mine. I opened a journal I hadn't touched since college and wrote a single line. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to remember who you are. And for the first time, I believed it. The next morning, I was in the elevator at Halbert when a young intern stepped in beside me, nervous. Probably his first week. He glanced over and said, "Excuse me, are you Thane Mercer?" I nodded. His face lit up with relief. "I just wanted to say, thank you for what you're doing here. It feels different, better." I smiled. Just a small gesture, but the most honest connection I'd felt in weeks. I wasn't Blythe's husband anymore. I wasn't the guy who got fired. I was Thane. No titles. No masks. And for the first time, that was enough. But peace has a way of getting interrupted. One Tuesday afternoon, while reviewing internal audit reports in my office, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost let it go. But something instinct, maybe, made me answer. "Thane Mercer?" a man asked. "Yes." "Who is this?" "It's Callum Vega. We met years ago at your cousin Dex's wedding. I work in cybersecurity now. I'm not sure if you remember me." "Vaguely. Is something wrong?" There was a pause. "I think you need to see something," he said. "It's about Blythe and Celeste. I found it by accident during a job for a client. I couldn't ignore it." "What is it?" "Video recordings. From a hotel. It's not something I can email. You need to come in person." 2 hours later, I sat in a small downtown San Francisco office. Callum greeted me with a tight expression and led me to a back room. He placed his laptop on the table and hit play. The footage was crisp, hidden camera, corner of a hotel suite. There sat Blythe and Celeste, wine glasses in hand, laughing. But what they said chilled the room. "Celeste, he trusts too much. He has no idea what's coming." Blythe, "Just a little longer." After the April meeting, we cut him out. Celeste, "Once he's gone, it's done. We restructure. You get the face, I keep the decisions. Clean exit." Blythe, "And if he gets suspicious?" Celeste, "He won't. He's not as sharp as he thinks." 5 minutes. That's how long the video lasted. I didn't blink once. Then Callum played another clip. This time, Blythe alone, 2 days before I was fired, speaking into her phone. "It's done. He gets the letter tomorrow. You can come over after. I want to celebrate." I sat frozen. This wasn't emotional betrayal. It was orchestration. It was cold, calculated, targeted. I looked at Callum. "Where did you get this?" "A client hired us to investigate a data breach. We stumbled on an unsecured cloud server, forgotten by the technician who installed the hotel's camera system. One of my analysts opened it by mistake. I recognized your name. I couldn't ignore it." I shook his hand longer than necessary. Then I left without a word. No thoughts. Just fire under my skin. I had believed the worst was over, that the silence was closure. But this wasn't silence. This was war. And for the first time, I felt something I hadn't let myself feel. Rage. Not wild. Not reckless. Focused. Cold. Honest. I called my attorney, Julian Trent. "We need to talk," I said. "Is it urgent?" "No," I replied. "It's historic." The next morning, I met with Julian Trent in his office overlooking the marina. He'd been my legal counsel for years, sharp, unshakable, and ruthless when needed. I placed a flash drive on his desk. "Everything's on there," I said. "Audio, video, dates, faces." He watched a few clips, his expression turning stone cold. "This isn't just betrayal," he said. "It's corporate conspiracy, defamation, malicious intent." "I don't want money," I told him. "I want the truth seen. Publicly." He nodded once. "Then we do it clean. No leaks. No press drops. We go through the right doors, and when they open, the world watches." By Friday, we had built the case. The evidence wasn't just shocking, it was airtight. Julian hand-delivered copies to Halbert's Systems Ethics Committee and to 2 trusted investigative journalists I'd known since my early career. By Monday at 6 a.m., the storm hit. Leaked footage reveals conspiracy against former Halbert executive. Video evidence exposes plot within tech giant's leadership. Celeste vanished from the company within hours. Her title stripped. Her reputation in freefall. Her face, once synonymous with Halbert, now disappeared from every document, website, and hallway screen. Blythe, on the other hand, simply vanished. No statements. No interviews. No denials. Just silence. And that silence said more than any apology ever could. I didn't stop there. What they did wasn't just personal, it was strategic, calculated. They had tried to erase me from a system I helped build. So I dismantled it. The board called an emergency session. The chairman, who once avoided eye contact with me, asked me to take a seat at the table again. I agreed. On one condition. I don't want a seat, I said. I want direction. Within 3 weeks, I was appointed interim CEO. Yes, the same man who had been thrown out like a used napkin was now in charge of the very company they tried to control from the shadows. But this wasn't a fairy tale ending. I didn't want to close the loop. I wanted to break the cycle. I ordered a full audit, 3 years back. Every contract, every payout, every signed deal. What we found was worse than expected. Shell payments, consultant scams, offshore transfers masked as tech upgrades, funds funneled quietly through friends, shell core, even relatives. Celeste hadn't just wanted power. She had been bleeding the company dry from the inside. And Blythe? Her name appeared on at least 4 irregular contracts, paid as a strategic liaison during quarters when she hadn't even set foot in the building. She knew. She benefited. With that, Julian and our external legal team prepared the next phase, formal legal action, not just for theft, for conspiracy, for fraud, for calculated defamation with professional consequences. But the hardest part wasn't in the paperwork. It was telling my mother. She loved Blythe. From the beginning, she welcomed her like family, defended her when I hesitated, called her daughter. When I told her everything, she didn't cry. She just hugged me like she was holding the broken pieces together. You okay? She asked quietly. I don't know. What are you going to do with all this? Finish what they started, I said. 2 weeks later, Blythe finally reached out. A short message. No emojis. No excuses. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I just needed you to know I was wrong. I hope one day you can rebuild what we took from you. I read it 3 times. I didn't reply. Not because I had nothing to say, but because she no longer had access to the part of me that once needed her approval. She'd made her choice. So had I. We filed the charges the following day with the California state prosecutor. The investigation was opened within the week. Bank accounts were frozen. Formal subpoenas were issued. The media exploded. CEO mother-daughter duo under criminal investigation. Mercer versus Mercer. Corporate coup turns legal firestorm. Some headlines called me a silent hero. Others painted me as a calculated strategist. They were all wrong. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I was just done being their fool. That night, I walked the empty halls of Halbert's top floor, looking out over the glowing city. They had tried to sink me. They didn't know I could swim and build bridges while underwater. This wasn't revenge. This was justice. And I was just getting started. Days passed since the case went public. Halbert's systems had begun to stabilize, though the company bore the scars of betrayal. I refused interview requests. No statements. No spotlights. I let the facts speak. I wasn't chasing headlines. I was cleaning up a mess I didn't create, but one I refused to ignore. One rainy night, just after 10:30 p.m., I left a late strategy session and made my way to the underground parking garage. The storm outside echoed through the concrete structure. I was halfway to my car when I saw her. Blythe, soaked jacket, red-rimmed eyes, hair in disarray, no jewelry, no polished posture, just raw. She stood against a column, silent. I didn't freeze. I didn't flinch. I simply walked toward my car. She followed. I won't make a scene, she said quietly. I just need a minute. I sighed, turned around. Speak. She hesitated, then began. Everything's fallen apart, she said. I've lost friends, money, reputation. I can't go anywhere without people staring. My mother won't return my calls. And you, she swallowed. You haven't said a word to me. What did you expect? I asked. Sympathy? Closure? No, she admitted, voice cracking. I just wanted to say something real. For once. I folded my arms. Then say it. Celeste filled my head with doubts. Made me believe you were holding me back. That you lacked ambition. That you'd always be in her shadow. She paused. But it wasn't her choice. I made every decision. I betrayed you. I looked down on you. I said nothing. She wiped her face with her sleeve. I know I don't deserve anything. But I needed to say that. There was silence. The kind that's louder than shouting. I took a step closer. She instinctively braced for impact, verbal or emotional. Do you know what hurts the most, Blythe? She shook her head. I saw it happening. The small changes. The distance. The scripted smiles. But I convinced myself it was just a phase. That you'd come back. That we'd fix it. Tears slipped down her cheeks. But I wasn't finished. The worst part wasn't losing you. It was realizing you were never fully with me to begin with. She broke, silent sobs shaking her shoulders. I don't hate you, I said softly. But I don't hold space for you anymore. She nodded, as if bracing for those words. Thank you for saying that. What now? I asked. What do you plan to do? I don't know, she whispered. Move. Start over. No one will hire me. No one trusts me. I wouldn't either. She nodded again. No fight left. I wish you peace, she said. Truly. And I wish you consequences. She turned to leave, then stopped. Can I ask you one last thing? I nodded once. Did you ever really love me? I didn't hesitate. Yes, I said. And that was my greatest mistake. She walked away without looking back. Her footsteps echoed between the columns until they disappeared into the rain. I stood there, under the fluorescent light, alone, but lighter. It wasn't closure. It was clarity. In the days that followed, things moved quickly. Celeste tried to delay proceedings through legal channels, but the evidence was overwhelming. Her financial accounts had been frozen, travel restricted. Her silence was no longer power. It was a shield collapsing. Internally, Halberd began healing. Teams spoke more freely. Department heads stopped watching their backs. I was still interim CEO, but I treated the role like a transition, not a throne. Then one afternoon, I received an invitation to speak at a local university. Topic: Ethics and Leadership in Times of Crisis. Fitting. I accepted. The auditorium was packed. Students, young executives, journalists, even. I told them the truth, raw and unpolished. About trust, about manipulation, about what it costs to protect your integrity when the people closest to you try to weaponize it. I ended with this. Character isn't measured by what you build. It's measured by what you refuse to destroy to get there. Sometimes, they'll hand you a brochure for a homeless shelter, expecting you to vanish. But if you're lucky, if you're ready, you'll turn that brochure into a map, and you'll use it to walk back stronger than ever. The applause was real, but what mattered most wasn't the clapping. It was the silence that followed. That quiet moment when people weren't just hearing you, they were feeling you. I returned home that night to a small house nestled just outside the city. Nothing grand, just large windows, quiet walls, and a dog named Finn who waited by the door like I was still the same man from a year ago. Maybe, in some ways, I was. But in most ways, I wasn't. I no longer answered unknown numbers. No more headlines. No more damage control. Just slow mornings, honest conversations, and a pace that felt intentional. Still, healing didn't come cleanly. There were nights I sat in the living room, watching old reruns, shows Blythe and I used to pretend we enjoyed together. Sometimes, I even caught myself turning to make a joke, only to realize the seat beside me was empty, and would stay that way. It was one of those nights, with the room lit only by the TV glow, when I realized something crucial. I didn't miss her. I missed the version of me who believed she loved me. That man, the one who trusted, who tried, who stayed, deserved better. And now he had it. The next morning, I drove to Cedar Hollow, the quiet Northern California town where my mother still lived. I hadn't visited in weeks. She greeted me with warm eyes and a kitchen already full of the smell of fresh coffee. You look calmer, she said as we sat down. I am, I replied, but also lonelier. She nodded, understanding more than I said. Peace can feel like solitude at first, especially after chaos. But it's worth it. We didn't speak about Blythe, or Celeste, or lawsuits. We talked about me, about who I had been before the betrayal, before the legacy, before the war. She reminded me of the boy who sold old tech parts online to fund his first startup, the kid who didn't care about surnames or suits. We laughed, we remembered, we reconnected, and that night, I slept deeper than I had in months. But even as peace took root, Halbert's systems still needed work. I didn't want to stay long-term. I'd never wanted the title, but I owed the company something more than just revenge. I called a meeting with the board. This company needs a new kind of leadership, I told them. Not another empire builder. Someone who listens, who rebuilds trust. They asked if I had someone in mind. I did. Mira Langston, the one who had messaged me when the tide first turned. She had vision, integrity, and more importantly, she knew what fear felt like inside those walls. It wasn't a typical recommendation, but the board agreed to consider her. Before leaving, I handed them a full audit summary of the last 36 months, annotated, itemized, and verified. I didn't want gratitude. I wanted the rot cleared completely. The next day, I stepped down as interim CEO. No press conference. No drama. Just a quiet exit, on my terms. That evening, I found myself walking through a small park on the edge of the city. Children laughed near a fountain. Couples held hands. Life moved forward, unbothered by boardrooms and betrayal. I sat on a bench and watched a young couple nearby, maybe in their 20s. She laughed loud and easy. He looked at her like she was the only thing that existed. I saw us in them, but not the real us, the version I thought we were, the one I fought to preserve, the illusion. And I realized, finally, that what hurt most wasn't losing her. It was losing the idea of her. Later that night, back home, I opened my old journal, the one I'd dusted off weeks earlier. This time, I didn't just write one sentence. I wrote page after page. Thoughts, fears, hopes, clarity. And then, one line that felt like a heartbeat. Betrayal doesn't destroy you. Obsessing over why you didn't see it coming, that's what does. I closed the book, poured a glass of wine, lifted it not to my past, but to the things I'd never tolerate again. That's when it arrived. A single email. No subject line. No clear sender. Just one line of text. You haven't seen the end yet. I stared at it. No attachments. No signature. Just that. My chest tightened, not in fear, but awareness. Something was coming. And whatever it was, I'd be ready. The message haunted me more than I wanted to admit. You haven't seen the end yet. It wasn't just vague. It was deliberate. A provocation dressed as prophecy. The next morning, I called Callum Vega again. I need you to trace something, I said. Anonymous email. Came last night. By midday, he had an answer. It came from a disposable device, he said. Public Wi-Fi. A cafe downtown. Anything else? Yeah. You're going to love this. Guess who used to frequent that cafe every Wednesday? Celeste. He didn't need to say more. So it wasn't over. She was still moving pieces behind the scenes. Maybe angry. Maybe desperate. Maybe both. I tightened my defenses. I briefed my legal team. I asked Everett Locke to initiate a full background sweep of any remaining assets tied to the Mercer name that Celeste or Blythe might try to touch. 2 days later, I received a formal court summons. A civil suit. Celeste Mercer was suing me. Claim. Unlawful use of proprietary information for hostile debt acquisition. I read it twice, stunned, and then I laughed. So this was her last move. A smear attempt, disguised as legal action. She wanted to taint my name publicly. Repaint the story as corporate espionage. Drag me through the courts so she could pretend she was the one wronged. But she didn't know how far ahead I'd played this game. During my entire tenure at Halberd Systems, I had followed every compliance protocol to the letter. Every file I accessed had documented clearance. Every backup, every document, every email logged and timestamped. Even the file she had asked me to delete months before my firing, I had saved those, too. With her written request, timestamped and archived. And beyond that, I had already commissioned a private, third-party audit, hired not by me, but by Halberd's board, weeks before the takeover. That report exposed it all. Fraudulent contracts. Misuse of company funds. Emails in which Celeste herself wrote, "If Thane becomes a threat, we'll fabricate a story about security violations. Paint him as unstable." I wasn't just armed. I was fireproof. The day of the hearing, the courtroom was packed. Press in the gallery. Former employees. Executives. Lawyers with eyes like hawks. Celeste arrived draped in neutral tones, her face as composed as ever, but her eyes flicked nervously across the room. She didn't find me until I stood. No entourage. No dramatics. Just me. With a folder full of proof. Her attorney went first, speaking with polish and force. Mr. Mercer engaged in deceptive financial activity, leveraging his insider access for personal gain. I waited. Then it was my turn. I approached the bench calmly, placed a copy of the audit on the table. I didn't speak much. I didn't need to. The numbers did. The evidence did. The final blow came in the form of an internal email she'd sent to Blythe. If the media ever gets curious, we'll spin it. Say we were protecting the company from Thane's unpredictable behavior. No one will question us. The room froze. Even her own lawyer went quiet. Celeste sat stone still, but her eyes blinked rapidly, the only crack in her mask. The judge called for a recess. When we returned, the ruling was swift. Case dismissed. Further recommendation, full state investigation into Celeste Mercer's executive conduct. And me? The judge offered something rare, a formal, on-record apology for the accusation. I walked out of that courtroom without a word. But that night, I opened a bottle of wine, not to celebrate, to breathe, because it wasn't just a win, it was closure backed by truth. Later that evening, as I sat on the balcony watching the fog roll over the bay, my phone buzzed again. Another email. No subject, no sender, just 2 words. You lost. I stared at the screen, smiled, and whispered, "So did you." The next day, the headline spoke for me. Former CEO's lawsuit collapses under evidence. Whistleblower or warrior? The man who outplayed a power dynasty. Celeste disappeared from public life. And Halberd? They offered me the chair permanently. I declined. That chapter was over, and I was finally ready to write something new. 5 weeks passed since the courtroom collapsed around Celeste Mercer. 5 weeks since I walked out without a title, a trophy, or a grudge, just freedom. The media moved on. Another scandal. Another fall. Another rise. But I didn't move quickly. For the first time in years, I let the world spin without trying to keep up. No board meetings. No deadlines. No damage control. Just silence. And healing. I never saw Blythe again. Not in court. Not in passing. Her final voice message remained deleted. Her number still blocked. Not out of vengeance, but because some chapters must stay closed. Still, closure isn't always clean. There were nights when I jolted awake, half expecting her voice, or that gut-deep need to explain myself one more time. But I didn't owe her anything. Not anymore. And yet, peace didn't arrive just because I'd won. Because winning doesn't erase wounds. To shake that weight, I returned to where everything started. San Isidro, where the sidewalks cracked under sneakers, and neighbors still used first names. I walked past the house where my grandmother once lived, vacant now, still holding echoes of summer days and sugar-dusted bread. I sat on the curb like I used to as a kid and whispered, "I made it, Dad." But not how we dreamed. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just breathed. That week, I officially launched my new company. No suits. No acquisitions. No media strategy. It was a development firm, but not like the kind that eats up land and spits out steel. Ours focused on community revival, small homes, startup spaces, public hubs, real places, for real people. I poured part of my own capital into pilot projects in Oakland, South Sacramento, and Modesto. I met with nonprofits, formed partnerships, built a volunteer network from the ashes of my old Rolodex. And for the first time in a long time, what I built felt alive. One afternoon, while drafting blueprints, I received a letter, an actual letter, handwritten, postmarked from a town up north, from Blythe. I stared at the envelope for a minute before opening it. No pleading, no manipulation, just confession. She wrote that she was in therapy, that every week peeled back another layer of what she'd done, that for the first time, she understood the difference between ambition and cruelty. "I won't ask you to forgive me," she wrote, "but I need you to know I've changed. Not because I lost everything, but because I finally saw what I threw away." I didn't respond. Not because I didn't believe her, but because it didn't matter anymore. Her path was no longer mine to walk beside. A month later, I was invited to speak at a university again. Same topic, leadership and ethics in crisis. This time, I accepted not as the man who'd been betrayed, but as the one who had rebuilt something better. The auditorium was packed, but I didn't bring notes. I didn't rehearse. I just told the story, from beginning to end. No villains, no saints, just choices, consequences, and the truth between them. I ended with this. Leadership isn't about power. It's about not folding when the world convinces you you're nothing. It's about standing up when the people closest to you hand you a map to nowhere, and drawing your own way out. The applause didn't feel loud. It felt real. Later that night, back home, I sat on the floor with Finn curled at my side. I lit no candles, played no music. I just stared out the window at a city that no longer felt like a battlefield. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the next blow. No threats, no lawsuits, no ghosts, just air, quiet, space. Then I remembered something my mother once said. Peace isn't when the war ends. It's when you stop checking the door to see if it'll come back. I stood, walked to the door, and locked it, not in fear, in freedom. 3 months later, I stood beneath an unfinished steel frame in South Sacramento, dust in the air, the sound of hammers, sunlight bouncing off concrete. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. This was our first major project, a hybrid shelter and skills center built through Zero Mark Foundation and my new company. It would house up to 50 men in transition, offer classes, mental health support, a second start for those who'd been written off, just like they tried to write me off. A reporter from a local outlet approached me. "You were once the center of a corporate storm," she said. "Now you're laying bricks with your name off the side. Why?" I looked around, saw volunteers, saw progress, saw purpose. "Because this is the first thing I built that isn't about proving anything," I said. "It's just about doing the right thing." She nodded, quietly impressed. After she left, I stayed on site, helping carry plywood. Every hour I gave this place felt like it put another piece of myself back together. That night, back at home, I fed Finn, opened my journal, and flipped through pages filled over the last year. Memories, pain, resolve. I stopped on one page, written the night Blythe handed me the shelter pamphlet. Just 5 words. Don't become what they are. I closed the book. I hadn't, and I wouldn't. 1 week later, I received a message I never expected. Dex Mercer, my cousin, the only family member who had ever known both sides of me, the heir and the builder. We hadn't spoken since my rise. He'd kept his distance, perhaps out of respect, perhaps uncertainty. His message was short. Proud of you. Let's talk sometime. I think we've both outgrown who they expected us to be. I smiled, not because it healed something, but because some people understand you better from afar, and that's okay. That weekend, I took a walk through Mission Hill Park, a quiet stretch of green the first used to pass on the way to Halbert Systems. Back when I thought success meant boardrooms and bulletproof suits. Now, I wore jeans and a hoodie. No one looked twice. That was the best part. On a nearby bench, an older man sat sketching buildings. We exchanged nods. I watched for a moment, his pencil scratched quiet brilliance. He looked up. You design? He asked. I rebuild, I said with a shrug. Same thing, he replied. The hard part's knowing where to start. He went back to sketching. I stood, ready to leave. Then he added, you seem like a man who survived something. I paused, turned slightly. Yeah, I said. But surviving isn't what made me. What I did after, that's who I am now. He smiled without looking up. As I walked home, a light drizzle began. The city blurred slightly around the edges, soft and quiet. My phone buzzed. One last email. Unknown sender. No subject, but this time, only one word. Respect. I didn't need to trace it. Didn't need to reply. Whoever sent it, it didn't matter. Because I'd already answered in every decision I made since that first fall. And if anyone asked what I learned from it all, I'd tell them this. You don't need revenge to win. You need vision. You don't need applause to matter. You need clarity. And you don't need them to see your worth. As long as you do. That night, as the rain tapped gently on the windows, I poured one final glass of wine, not for what I'd lost, but for everything I'd never lose again. Peace. Purpose. Myself.